What if conferences were decided by how good a college performed? I think that makes way more sense than some of the recent alignment we've seen. So today I'm bringing promotion and relegation to college football. Just for an example on how this works in the soccer realm, the bottom 3 teams at the end of the season get relegated down to the 2nd division. So if we take that, apply it to the Big Ten, the bottom 3 teams are getting sent down to the MAC conference. Movements like this are guaranteed to get small schools more money, better recruits, and more national attention. So we're going to follow how this changes college football over a 15-year time frame. How this will work is I've connected the ACC with the American Conference, the Big Ten with the MAC Conference, the Big 12 with Conference USA, the new Pac-12 with the new Mountain West, and of course the SEC with the Sun Belt. The first season's going to look pretty similar to what's happening in real life. So here in the ACC, I can't act too surprised that Wake Forest, Florida State, and North Carolina are going down. Swapping places from them in the American is going to be Navy, FAU, and North Texas. And anytime there's some massive tiebreaker like this, I'm just going to hope that the game sorts the tiebreakers in the correct fashion. In future seasons, I'll also follow Week 14 a bit closer for crucial matchups, but at least in Season 1, it's the relegations that you'd expect. Out of the SEC, Auburn's going down, Mississippi State is, and my Wildcats are too. That hurts to see, but maybe they'll do well in the Sun Belt where they're sending up James Madison, Texas State, and Old Dominion. But before I forget about it, I should point out that I had to put all the independent schools in a conference. That means poor Notre Dame had to actually join the ACC for football, while UMass went over to the MAC, which they're joining in 2025 anyway. The new Pac-12 also only has these 7 teams as of right now, so since it's linked with the Mountain West, who has 8, these conferences are the only ones that'll be sending 2 teams up and down instead of 3. UTEP's joining the Mountain West in the future, so there and there. And finally, I put UConn in Conference USA just to balance out some of the numbers. With all the rules and structure out of the way, we can finally talk about the rest of Season 1. This is the current top 25, but there's still a conference championship week that has to be played. We're just seeing who's going up and down at the moment. We have Houston, Kansas, and TCU getting relegated. So they'll be in Conference USA, where UConn wins it in their first year here, with Western Kentucky and Jacksonville State right behind. Then out of the Big Ten, it's not important who's winning the conference. It's important about who's going down. We have Purdue, Michigan State, and UCLA getting sent to the MAC. But what I'm more interested in is how Miami University, Toledo, and Buffalo perform in the Big Ten next season. The last promotion and relegation we have for now is San Diego State and Utah State getting sent back to the Mountain West, while UNLV and Wyoming get to move up. I know all that was a lot to take in, so I've also made this chart to track all the movement. And for our first Heisman winner, it's going to be Drew Aller from Penn State. I expect that in these first few seasons, the playoffs are going to be dominated by Power 4 teams. I'm really curious if that changes over time though, and looking at the conference championship winners, Boise State should have made it over Navy. They won their game, they're ranked higher, but the Pac-12's is missing. So if EA's going to glitch out their conference championship winner every season, I'm just going to swap all these teams with the Mountain West and make this the prestigious conference. But I'll be very curious, the stuff that's happening around the world in college football, what players should have won awards, what players should have won the Heisman. And if you think I fly through stuff too fast, you can pause at any moment. We have Oregon and Iowa State in the first championship. But Navy put up a good fight against Penn State, and they'll be in the ACC next year. Anyway, any game I'm curious about, I'll be able to hop in to see what happens in it. And here's the thing, we gotta spectate these championship games, see what happens. Iowa State is currently trailing, but they're gonna beat the Oregon defense deep, and they're gonna take a lead with a minute left. This is why I want to hop into some of them, just to see what happens. And the Ducks' first championship is now all in the hands of Dylan Gabriel. Can he lead them into field goal range so they pull this off? They got very lucky with their tight end getting like 30 or 40. And maybe in one of these championships in the future, we'll be watching a smaller school. I really want to see a tinier school move their way up into like the SEC and start dominating. But for now, we're just watching Oregon close out this championship game, and they hit it. They took a lot of time with them, so it's going to be hard for Iowa State to respond back. They should be our first national champions of this 15-year sim, and that will conclude it. I'm also going to make sure that I keep track of who wins the most championships throughout this video. And the transfer portal has already shown Kentucky losing their best corner to Penn State because they've been relegated to the Sun Belt. My favorite team's going to be in a bad spot if they can't finish in the top 3 and move back up to the SEC. And I've made one more adjustment to every conference. I've scheduled them for as many conference games as they can possibly play. Because if you look at the English Premier League system, the only games that count towards promotion or relegation are ones against conference opponents. That should prevent like a 7-5, 8-4 team ever having a chance of getting sent down. I also flipped the Pac-12 and Mountain West like I said I would. But looking at all these alignments like Florida State in the American, then in the ACC, you got teams like North Texas, Navy. I mean, so much is changing around the college football world. And right now, the 5 conferences we have as the 5 top divisions are rated higher than all the bottom ones. But as we simulate through season number 2, there's a chance it could change. Now, as we head into the final few weeks of the season, you'll see that playing 12 conference games really hasn't affected the big teams in college football that much. But those teams like Kentucky that drop down to to the Sun Belt are struggling to even get back up. They have to win one more game. It's also very interesting that here in the ACC, we have 3 other former ACC schools doing worse than some of the teams that just moved up. With one more week left in the season as well, seeing Kentucky 1 and the other 2 SEC schools are set to move back up, I want to focus on Arkansas State's game, because if the Red Wolves win this, the 1.5-star school gets to move into the SEC. They're going up against 4-7 Coastal Carolina, and they're currently the higher overall team. So I probably should have gone into this expecting them to win, but there is a slight chance for Coastal Carolina to get in field goal range here. Now, they had to use all their timeouts just to get backed up on the 1-yard line with 30 seconds left, but they have found a receiver that's beaten the press, and he is streaking down the field. This is going to send Kentucky to the SEC. Of the 2 games we've hopped into so far, we have seen 2 long touchdowns like that. So it makes you wonder, maybe teams shouldn't press with almost no time left in a game. Arkansas State can fight right here, but I really think it won't matter. I'm pretty sure Kentucky has the tiebreaker. I'm just saying that, hoping that they do. They don't catch the ball. And Coastal Carolina might have just saved the downfall of Kentucky football. Never mind, I take that back. Arkansas State beat my Wildcats, so they have the tiebreaker. That meant nothing. I hopped into that game for no reason. Arkansas State's going up to the SEC with Auburn and Mississippi State returning. And the teams that are going to be dropping back down are Old Dominion, Texas State, and poor Vanderbilt. Then over in the ACC, we have Clemson and Miami probably in the championship, but we have Stanford, Virginia, and Duke all dropping down to the American. There's also only one ACC team returning, with Florida State being up here with Charlotte and East Carolina. So it's cool to see the Seminoles bounce back. Over in the Big Ten, we have Minnesota, Miami University, and Buffalo going back to the MAC. While Purdue, UCLA, and Ball State are going up, we had Michigan State struggle in this conference with some of the other schools from their state, like Central Michigan and Eastern Michigan. One season in these bigger conferences might be enough to help those small schools move back up pretty quickly, though. In the Big 12, we actually have 3 of them going down: Oklahoma State, Iowa State, and Texas Tech. I don't know how Conference USA did it, but they've infiltrated the Big 12 successfully, though Kansas and TCU are going up with Middle Tennessee State. And finally, for the last bit of movement before we see who makes the playoffs, we have UNLV and Colorado State dropping down to the Pac-12, while Air Force and New Mexico move up. I know that's a lot to all take in at once, so here's all the movements that have happened in Season 2 of this college football sim. And taking a look at the Heisman winner, it's going to come from Ohio State. Now, for all our conference championship winners, this is what really shapes up who is seeded where in the playoffs. And we've actually seen a Purdue team from the MAC get an automatic bid, but Boise State wasn't considered a conference champion again. I'm not really sure what's going on with that. Once again, a Georgia quarterback's leading the country in passing yards. In rushing yards, it's Darius Taylor on Michigan. He must have transferred there. And this is how the receiving played out. What I'm looking for in those season stats is for smaller schools to be up there. Boise State's actually making a run to the championship, but they have to get through Ohio State first, and I think this is one we should check out. Anytime a smaller school that's not supposed to be in the semifinals gets this far, I think we gotta see it. And I'd say Boise State's handled themselves pretty well. With 5 minutes left, they're only down by 10. They're looking to run on 3rd down for a touchdown, and Maddox might actually lead them all the way to the title game. They have run into a pretty big issue, though. They haven't been able to stop the Buckeyes. They're about to score, and the Broncos just fell behind by 10 points again. I'm not going to doubt Maddox Madsen yet, but right now it's not looking great for Boise State, and he literally just threw it straight to the Buckeyes. I don't think that's the last time that we're going to see the Broncos at this spot, though, and our championship game is between Georgia and Ohio State. I wanted to do 15 years of Seminole this, though, for a very good reason. I think it's going to take at least 5 or 6 years for the Blue Bloods to not dominate as much, and it's going to be a process for small schools to even stand a chance. Georgia is picking up this 4th and 8, but even though their drive continues, being down by 11 points with a minute left, I've kind of written them off for coming back. They only have 2 timeouts remaining, so pretty much Ohio State has this second season championship locked up. And even with a Buckeye having an injury timeout, it's 3rd and 7. They are about to get the sack. No, they're going to break it and still almost throw a pick. It's not looking good for Georgia, but they are going to kick a field goal here, and all Ohio State has to do is recover the onside kick. It went straight to them. Well, the Buckeyes are tied up with Oregon for 1 championship each now, and both title-winning teams have come out of the Big Ten so far, along with some other really dominant programs, so it's interesting that Toledo was even able to stay up. You can really see how getting promoted helps a team's prestige. Toledo's up to a 3-star one, and I don't think it's a coincidence North Carolina, who got moved down to the American and isn't moving back up, lost the #1 player in the transfer portal to Georgia. I think so far the conference that's changed the most is the ACC. They have Charlotte, FAU, East Carolina, North Texas, Navy, SMU even joined the year before for no reason. While the American Conference might be the smartest one in the country, they got Duke, Stanford, and Rice. As we simulate through year number 3, my prediction is Georgia Tech also drops down. Just going into the final few weeks, the top 25 at the top looks pretty normal, but once you get down to the bottom half, that's where things have started to really shift. I was wrong about Georgia Tech, though Boston College is going to be fighting to stay in the ACC. There's a lot of 3-loss teams though, so if they win this, it's going to really shake things out. It's kind of weird that so far the biggest name that's been relegated is Florida State, which was expected. But that might not happen to Boston College. They won this one 24-7. Just looking across the rest of college football though, I am shocked that Arkansas State stayed up above Arkansas and Ole Miss almost went down. Mississippi State did again. And on the flip side of things, in the Sun Belt, Kentucky went 6-6, Vanderbilt's at the bottom of the conference, and 3 former Sun Belt teams are all going up to the SEC. Even if the top of conferences like the ACC seem to be staying pretty on track, things at the bottom are changing. Boston College did survive. They sent down Navy. And at least as a Kentucky fan, I get to see Louisville going down as well to the American, with Charlotte returning there too. There seems to be quite a bit of crossover between these two conferences. I mean, the American teams just beat up on each other. Stanford, Tulane, UAB going up to the ACC. And then we have the Big Ten. USC is currently the #1 team in the country, but out of this conference, Penn State almost dropped down to the MAC. Rutgers lost another game. It wasn't as close as it looked. I was keeping an eye on it, but Rutgers, Illinois, and UCLA are all going to the MAC. And look at that. Michigan State is returning back to the Big Ten along with Minnesota, and Central Michigan's joining them. Now, I'm not sure why some teams don't play 12 conference games. I don't think the game was built for you to set that for every conference. Kansas State, undefeated #4 team in the country though, and Jacksonville State, Middle Tennessee, and TCU are all going to Conference USA. Meanwhile, Texas Tech and Oklahoma State couldn't move back up to the Big 12. Instead, we got Louisiana Tech, Kennesaw State, and Houston. Kennesaw State's the newest team to the FBS level. They're the team I've been simming on. I didn't expect them to have success, but they only ended up playing 9 conference games. So the test of 12 conference games a year has been cool, but it's not working. I'm going to return all the big conferences back to 9. That's not going to apply to the Mountain West, where they have both New Mexico and Air Force returning to the Pac-12. They started off on the weaker conference. UNLV's going back up along with UTEP. Now here's a simplified version of all the changes happening without seeing literally every single college's record in the country. And during conference championship week, we have some interesting results. I think Coastal Carolina is going to be a school that gets a first-round bye. They didn't have somebody in the Heisman running though. It's going to go to USC's quarterback. And I'm not sure why Boise State is the only college that the game refuses to give a first-round bye, but they're still doing all right. I'm starting to think for it to count, maybe the conference needs to have 8 teams in it, so what I'm actually going to do is move up 3 schools from the Pac-12 this year. And looking across the country, Cole Pennington represents the group of 5 down here, but there's a quarterback that threw for 54 touchdowns, Miami's. And then when it came to running the ball, both UNLV and Marshall's running backs were the 2 leading ones in the country. Stanford's receiver was the best receiver. But then again, Tyler Brown also had 24 receiving touchdowns, so maybe it was him. With all that said, it is Coastal Carolina that has made it to the semifinals. And they might be facing the #1 team, a Heisman winner, but we have to see how they do. This is a school that has already been able to earn their way into the SEC next season, but it's clearly not a school that's going to give us an entertaining matchup versus USC. They have a lot to work on if they don't want to get relegated, especially that defense. They let Jacoby Lane just dominate. It's also just hit me that the Big Ten is going for their 3rd straight national champion, and of all schools standing in their way of doing that, it's Pittsburgh. I will say though, we can't count out Eli Holstein yet. Currently, they're only down by 7, and it seems like the Panthers are about to score a touchdown here. They do. What they're going to have to lean on is their defense though. Can they stop the Heisman winning quarterback to have a chance at getting a championship? Of course, there is a lot that is at stake right here, and USC is just going backwards, which means they're probably going to play this pretty passively on 3rd down. They did. They handed it off, and they're not getting enough. I'm very impressed that Pitt called a timeout. They're playing this smart. All they have to do is get into field goal range. That punt doesn't pin them back far, and all the pressure is on Eli Holstein to get a school other than a Big Ten school a championship. With a missed throw on 1st down though and taking the sack there, we're going to overtime. At least I'm expecting us to go to overtime. We'll see if USC does anything with this. I mean, they ran the ball, but all it takes is one big passing play to put them in field goal range, and this is going to be out of bounds. Things are about to get real tight in the championship, and the Panthers have the ball first. Eli's going nowhere. I think Pitt's blown their chance at winning it all. They're going to probably have to settle for a field goal, and that sack definitely locks it in. It's never a guarantee from this distance either, though their kicker seems to be soft. solid. And we know what USC has to do here. If they score a touchdown, it's all over. It's not looking good. 3 years in, it's been the Big Ten reigning supreme, not the SEC, and that's probably going to remain true as they do get in. The Trojans have done it. Their Heisman winning quarterback made a great play there, and I'm just hopeful that by the end of this, at least a few of the champions catch me off guard. Now, in the transfer portal, we've seen some interesting movement. Tayshawn Lord was Ole Miss's starting quarterback, but they were so bad that he is transferred to Clemson. And that's how you know this is a video game. Clemson's using the transfer portal. But that felt important enough in this world to mention, and remember, any conference that can have at least 9 conference games is going to have that instead of 12 now. Now, before we start season 4, I have noticed there are conferences like the Big Ten that only have 3 schools from the MAC in it. So if those 3 schools finish at the bottom of their conference and Illinois, Rutgers, and UCLA are able to win the MAC, for the first time in this video, we could see a conference return back to what it was before all of this promotion and relegation. That is not how the Big Ten has played out though. Going into this final week, the 5 teams that are tied at the bottom of the conference are all former Big Ten schools. And on the MAC side of things, Rutgers is the only one that's currently in the top 3. There's a lot of options of things we could check in on. Ole Miss is going down in the SEC. Texas still has a shot of doing so. And I was so focused on the bottom of the Big Ten standings, I didn't realize Toledo was the number 2 team in the country. I knew we'd eventually hit peak chaos though. Penn State has to beat number 11 Washington to stay up, then Minnesota and Wisconsin are fighting to stay up. So right now there's a lot on the line. We will see if the Nittany Lions are able to take down Washington at home. As time winds down right here though, I think we have to assume that Penn State is about to find themselves playing in the MAC, because with less than 20 seconds left, they're trailing by 2 possessions. They need a miracle. Now they have been able to get it down inside the 5-yard line, though they're gonna have to scramble in on this play, and Washington better hope they recover an onside kick. Here we go. Is Penn State going to get relegated? They have no chance now. Washington seals it, and this is the biggest relegation we've seen so far in this video. Also, staying in the Big Ten, these 2 teams are 2-6 in conference play, so the winner of this rivalry should be safe from getting moved down and relegated. This is the exact type of drama I was hoping for. Minnesota is about to find their receiver on the right side of the field that is outrunning all these Wisconsin defenders, and they just won the MAC conference last season. They really don't want to return there, but their defense has to step up. Minnesota's been a team moving up and down. If they ever want to go past that, they have to have consistency. So that's what makes this game so crucial to them. That touchdown, such a big deal, and there's a flag. Minnesota hit the quarterback late. They're giving the Badgers a chance. And somebody tell Wisconsin that they still have all 3 of their timeouts. It took them forever to use one, but those don't carry over to next week or next season, and over on that right side, they're about to score. Whoever is going down to the MAC comes down to 1 or 2 plays on 1st and goal. The Badgers are going to throw an interception to Minnesota. It is over. You can throw that ball in the air or try to return it for a touchdown. Either way, it is time to celebrate because you have avoided playing in the MAC next season. Well, it was clearly decided right there. Penn State and Wisconsin are going down alongside Maryland, and Rutgers is no longer coming up. They lost a game, so Illinois is in the top 3 alongside Northern Illinois and Miami University again. Now, something else that caught me by surprise is Boise State didn't do that well in conference play. They're not going to make the conference championship. They weren't bad enough like Utah State and Wyoming to go down to the Pac-12 though, and joining the Mountain West next season will be Colorado State and Hawaii. Then in the Big 12, I want to point out Kennesaw State went 9-3. The teams moving down though are West Virginia, BYU, who was in the playoffs during the first season, and Western Kentucky. With only 10 teams in Conference USA and Liberty, Jacksonville State, and Oklahoma State going up to the Big 12, I'm pretty sure next season half of Conference USA is going to be built off of old Big 12 schools. Then we have the ACC. Florida State's reestablished themselves atop the conference even though they struggled at the beginning, but Stanford, Florida Atlantic, and East Carolina are going down. And then coming up from the American, we don't have any old ACC schools. It's Tulsa, Charlotte, and Temple. Finally, we have the SEC, which only has 3 top 25 teams. It's kind of started to fall off, and going down is Southern Miss, Arkansas State, and Ole Miss. Since Mississippi State finished at the bottom of the Sun Belt, all 3 teams from Mississippi will be in the Sun Belt next season. Arkansas, Louisiana, and James Madison are going up. But it's starting to bug me that Kentucky still hasn't been able to get promoted back up from the Sun Belt. During Conference Championship Week, Toledo actually beat Oregon by 1 point, which is huge to point out. They have won the Big Ten. Here are some of the other results. And I accidentally skipped over the Heisman winning screen, but it was this Miami wide receiver, the first receiver we've seen. So I figured he had to put up some crazy numbers, and he definitely did. He had 26 receiving touchdowns. Miami's quarterbacks continue to throw for the most touchdowns in the country. When it comes to rushing, Baylor is leading the way with Tulane right behind. And weirdly enough, how the brackets worked out is the SEC conference champion still doesn't get a first round bye. They have made it to the semifinals though, beating both Ohio State and Fresno State. Auburn was in the Sun Belt at one point. Now they're playing Toledo for a spot in the championship. And who would have thought all it took to to fix Auburn football was relegating them for a season. They clearly haven't felt very punished by that, and Toledo is representing the Big Ten at the moment. So with how those teams have carried themselves in the playoffs in previous seasons, they very well could come out on top of this. In fact, that's exactly what they're gonna do, because they had the ball and Auburn just couldn't get it back. Looking at the quarter-by-quarter breakdown, you'll see the Tigers tried their best, but I made the mistake of not spectating this 3rd and 9 where they completed a 10-yard pass, and it looks like the Rockets are going to be playing the Ducks, who they just played in the Big Ten Conference Championship a couple weeks ago. This is a huge moment for a team that's just an 80 overall. But looking at their actual roster, this is why I say don't trust the overalls that are displayed, and I think they're losing their head coach to Florida if that's what it means at the top right of the screen. He got them this far, but which Big Ten teams win in the championship? And I can't believe how much they're dominating college football at the moment. The entire conference is just crazy, but once you all see this final score, you're going to be disappointed. I wish I could even say it was a slight contest for Toledo. I'm not sure what happened, but they lost 48-6. With that in mind, Oregon's now won their 2nd championship in this video. And I know the Big Ten's not technically getting any better, they've actually gotten worse, but that was Toledo's best chance at winning it all. To my surprise though, they've had a pretty good season. Going into this final week of the season, there are a ton of teams tied at 3-5 in Big Ten conference play. And then you have the same thing going on in the SEC, where it's actually going to decide which one of these schools gets relegated to the Sun Belt. I think there's too much chaos to break it all apart, but I want to go over to Division II, Conference USA, where we have West Virginia and Western Kentucky tied at 5-3 in conference play, because most likely whoever wins this game is going to get promoted to the Big 12. We've seen teams fight to avoid being relegated. It's time to see teams fight for promotion. And I gotta say, West Virginia's let down a lot of their fans right here. They didn't even get off a final snap. They're going to lose this one with the final score of 17-3. But unfortunately for the Hilltoppers, TCU actually did have the tiebreaker over them because of a head-to-head win. They'll be going back to the Big 12 alongside Sam Houston and Middle Tennessee State moving up. And then in this conference, if we scroll on down, we're going to see Louisiana Tech, Arizona, and Kennesaw State are going to Conference USA. I feel like nothing there was that surprising. Going into the final week, Clemson was actually in the relegation zone, but Pittsburgh has taken that spot from them. I guess the Tigers had the head-to-head advantage. Temple and Virginia Tech are also dropping down to the American. And Stanford wants back into the ACC alongside North Carolina, with USF being the 3rd team that gets to join the conference. It is really weird to think though that 2 years ago Pittsburgh was in the national championship and now they've been relegated. Speaking of surprises, if Northwestern won last week, it's going to really spice things up here in the Big Ten, but apparently they didn't, so they're going down with Central Michigan and Purdue. While from the MAC, you have UCLA, Penn State joining the Big Ten again alongside Bowling Green. We all know what I care about though. It's the Sun Belt, where Kentucky is still going to be stuck. They went 5-7. You have Georgia Southern, Mississippi State, Ole Miss going up to the SEC. But my Wildcats cannot seem to get promoted ever again, and here we have Oklahoma, Florida dropping down alongside James Madison. Now, to be fair to the Mountain West and Pac-12, these are the ones I care least about. Boise State is back on top though, and UNLV's getting sent down again with UTEP. Coming up from the Pac-12, we have Nevada and San Jose State. These teams just all seem to rotate. They're all mid. But here's all your nicely organized realignment stuff from season number 5. We've still yet to see a Heisman winner from a small school, but this is the final season real players can even be on these rosters. Hawaii had a senior quarterback throw for the 2nd most passing yards in the country. And then rushing wise, both of these top players are already generated recruits. I'm curious about receivers. It is Hawaii's receivers that had the most yards, but not the most touchdowns. What's interesting about Hawaii as well is they finished 2nd in the Mountain West, the top division in their part, and they beat Boise State in the conference championship. So that means we're left with a playoff bracket where Toledo did get an at-large bid. They're the only former Group of 5 team that's even in here, and we'll see if they can make it all the way to the championship. They weren't able to get back there though. Oregon continues to be their kryptonite. Stanford and Ohio State have made it, and this is literally set up for another Big Ten team to win it all. That is now going to be 5 in a row. Stanford's put up a good fight, but they're currently down by 15. I'm not even going to get excited about the thought of them getting into the end zone here, because they still need like a million more things to go their way. It all starts with recovering this onside kick, and the Buckeyes player is going to snag it right out of the air, which means Ohio State's won their 2nd championship. They're tied with Oregon in this video, and the Big Ten's the only conference that's gotten any championship recognition. Looking back at the playoffs though, they did put in a third of the teams, and here's what blows my mind. Even with all of Toledo's success, they lost one of their best defensive players to Texas A&M. I guess they could have paid him more. While Maryland, who got relegated down to the MAC last season, is now losing their quarterback to Ohio State. Just seeing how many teams are ranked in the Big Ten though compared to all the other conferences, he might not have that much success, and maybe season 6 is the year that Kentucky can finally escape the Sun Belt. Well, going into the final week, it's far from being anywhere near a championship, but this is at least exciting to see. And for teams that still have close battles coming up, we could cover Missouri, but I think it's only right we pick out one of these these matchups in the Big Ten because there's a ton of 3-5 teams again, a couple 2-6 ones, and one of them is Toledo. Right now, it does look like they're going down, but they're playing at Northern Illinois, who's 3-5 in conference play. And no matter what happens here, there's a far more surprising team that's in the zone to get relegated. For now, though, we gotta lock in on this game. It's gone to overtime. It's all tied at 20. And this is a big moment for Toledo. Staying in the Big Ten for 3 years, having success is a program-defining thing. They get the interception, but they still haven't clinched their win. There's also no real guarantee this will be enough to stay up, but it's very crucial for their program's success that they at least try to, and they finally punched it in. The Rockets can celebrate, but they could be down in the MAC again. And it's time for the moment of truth. They are gonna be down here, but not below Northern Illinois, Miami University, or Bowling Green. 3 teams are all returning to the MAC. They're only being replaced by one team that was originally from the Big Ten, though, because Central Michigan's moving up alongside Wisconsin and UMass. And let's just get the Mountain West Pac-12 stuff over with. Fresno State and Nevada dropping down, while moving up we have Utah State and San Diego State. I will point out, Boise State went 8-4. You're disappointing all of us, and San Jose State just moved up from the Pac-12 last season. Then in the ACC, Notre Dame's up here at the top, undefeated. Joining a conference finally benefited them, but down at the bottom is the shocker I was talking about. Miami is going down, and that's as an 89 overall team alongside California and USF. Both of the Virginias are coming back up from the American, though, alongside Navy. A military school has some motion. And then we have the Big 12, which has pretty much just fallen apart at this point. You have Sam Houston, UCF, and Kansas State going down, but only BYU's going back up alongside Louisiana Tech and New Mexico State. Neither of those conferences are seeing much success, but finally we can talk about Kentucky alongside Georgia State and Oklahoma going to the SEC. And then coming from the SEC, we're going to have Louisiana, Missouri, and Coastal Carolina dropping down. Just taking a look at a chart, when we get to the offseason, we're definitely going to revisit Conference USA. And if Notre Dame is undefeated with a freshman quarterback winning the Heisman, that is scary for the future. They won the ACC championship pretty easily, and then the game was how the Big Ten Conference championship was settled. But even with Michigan beating Ohio State, the Buckeyes are still in the playoffs, and there's not a single Group of 5 team in this bracket. There's no underdog runs happening this season. Looking at all the stat leaders across the country as well, they pretty much all come from these big Power 4 schools. So we've moved on to the national championship, where there's not a Big Ten team participating in it. They didn't even make the semifinals. I do think everybody should be extremely terrified of Notre Dame, though, because they're undefeated with a freshman quarterback about to win the entire thing. His legacy has not completely started yet, though. At the moment, NC State is down by 6. They're getting a huge play against the Notre Dame defense, and with a minute and a half left, they're gonna have a 1-point lead. I have no idea how he was able to get by that safety there, but we have spectated so many huge plays. Interestingly enough, though, the ball is in the freshman's hands. Is he about to start his career right? I don't know. That's a pretty rough sack to take. It's now 2nd and 22. This isn't helping him much, but at least George Hackett is able to make it 3rd and 14, where NC State dialed in the pressure and they didn't get there fast enough. He really just flipped the script versus the Wolfpack, though they still have to be able to get into field goal range. And I'm afraid that NC State is currently watching their championship chances just go to crap. But then he took another terrible sack. It's like he has no awareness back there. I don't know what George Hackett was thinking. It's now 3rd and 25. This is going to probably get them close to field goal range, but they're not sending their kicking team out there. They've hurried it up on this 4th and 8. Come on, snap the ball. Will Notre Dame be able to pick this up, or is NC State winning it? They give up that. You have to imagine that just from here, they're going to be able to spike the ball. And this is it for the Irish. We've not had an undefeated national champion yet, but it's looking more and more likely. NC State's going to really have to use the rest of this clock well. And if they can't dial in a 40-yard pass in 7 seconds, it's just not going to happen. Their quarterback throws it on the run, though. This could be their opportunity, and neither of his feet were in bounds right there. If he could have established himself, they were in field goal range. Now it all comes down to this right here, and there's simply no way they go to the end zone, right? Wait, Notre Dame, come on, you've got to make a tackle. There might have been a split second of hope there if you're an NC State fan. But either way, the streak's been broken. We finally have a team that's not a Big Ten team winning it all. I think every other college in the country should be terrified of George Hackett, though. As a freshman, he's an 88 overall. He's only going to get better. And I'm starting to wonder how much conference prestige really changes, but I think it does, because the Pac-12's all the way down to the bottom. Just comparing the Big 12 to Conference USA at the moment as well, it seems like the bottom division, Division 2, might be a little bit better than the top one season, because at the moment, 6 of the 10 teams in Conference USA were originally a part of the Big 12. We've hit an interesting point in this video where there are schools like North Texas that got promoted years ago, and they've just been consistently good ever since. Toledo, for example, before last season, has started to really establish themselves in the Big 10, and I'm sure there's been many other journeys I've personally missed out on because I'm trying to cover all of college football every year. But I'm sure if you're following your team closely, you've been able to track how they've been good and bad throughout this whole promotion and relegation. Like I've been saying, the back half of this is what I'm truly excited about. We have some interesting teams inside the top 10 as we go into our final week. And there's currently 8 different teams that could be the third team getting relegated in the ACC. If any of these 3 and 5 teams lose, they could get moved down. I don't know how the tiebreakers work, but there's chaos everywhere. And looking at the top half of the Big Ten, it is so dominant. They have 7 of the top 13 teams. After taking a closer look at which game we should hop into, spectate, see who might get relegated, I've decided it's too hard to tell. There were simply too many battles where I couldn't even predict what could happen, and the ACC was one of them. Of course, I should first mention that Clemson was close to getting relegated a couple years ago. Now they've bounced back better than ever. North Texas is number 3. But more importantly, as we scroll down, the list of 3 and 6 teams in conference play is very lengthy, and Tulane and Virginia Tech are at the bottom of it. Virginia is also dropping down to the American just after moving up last season with Virginia Tech. And if you thought Miami was going to be in this conference for long, I'm not sure what you were thinking. UTSA and Duke are also going to go to the ACC. But now we have to visit the Big 12. This is a conference that seems to continue to get weaker and weaker, and now they're going to lose Arizona State, Oklahoma State, and Jacksonville State. Now, Conference USA is going to return them to original Big 12 teams with Arizona and UCF alongside Kennesaw State, but it's still crazy how these conferences have shifted. I really don't know what to think of it. I thought Nebraska was ranked like a week ago. Now they're 8-4, but we have Central Michigan, Iowa, and Washington getting sent to the MAC. Central Michigan seems to go back and forth in these divisions. Purdue gets back into the Big Ten alongside NIU and Ohio. And then Boise State in the Mountain West Conference, 8-4 again. We can't even consider them a serious top division, but they're sending down San Jose State and Hawaii, who were both just near the top of that conference in the past 2 seasons, and Wyoming and New Mexico are replacing them. It's been a cluster getting through all these changes. We have no top 12 teams in the SEC this year. Kentucky is not going down though. And for the teams that are, who are the bottom 3 in the SEC? We have Georgia Southern, Texas A&M, and Georgia State. I'm sure Texas A&M will bounce back pretty quick though, just like Florida and Missouri are coming back to the SEC with South Alabama. And I feel bad for Vanderbilt fans because they might sit at the bottom of the Sun Belt for the rest of this entire thing. I think what we can take away from this list of promotion and relegations in season 7 is the big schools always seem to bounce back quickly. And it just hit me that Notre Dame's quarterback was nowhere to be found on the Heisman Trophy watch, as this guy from Oregon ended up winning it all. Statistically speaking though, he was probably the best one in the country. He only had 4 interceptions while George Hackett did have 10 of them. And I'm also going to talk about Jamie Warrior, North Texas quarterback that's carried them. I'm sure he has been a big part of it. Sam Houston has a running back leading the country in rushing yards. And Wyoming's wasn't much farther behind, so the smaller schools are starting to improve a little bit. Notre Dame had the best receiver. But the Fighting Irish weren't even inside the top 25, so I had to look at their schedule to see what happened to them, and they ended up going 7-5. That's a crazy fall off from national champion. We got Kennesaw State winning Conference USA, UConn winning the Big 12. Some of these teams might be able to get into the playoffs, so it's really cool to see Kennesaw State there, and also UTSA and North Texas. To my surprise, not only did they beat UTSA, but they also took down Clemson. So going into the quarterfinals, all they have to do is beat Florida State, and if they can do that, they'd have a 50-50 chance at winning a championship. You know what happened instead though? They got shut out 35-0, and I'm not sure who Florida State has on this defense right now, but they just stopped the country's leading passer. Georgia lost 45-37 to the Trojans though, so USC's made it to another title game, and we know that history seems to side with the Big Ten schools in these situations. On the final play of the game, the Seminoles had a 93-yard touchdown, but they were down by 10, so they weren't able to come back from their deficit. I can't believe I'm saying this, but Oregon, USC, and Ohio State are all tied with 2 championships in this sim. And as a fan of an SEC school, I'm disappointed in what our conference has become. I can't believe not a single SEC school has won a championship yet. I mean, you can see that teams like Georgia are still signing the best classes in the country. But that's not been enough, and I noticed that the top quarterback in this transfer class went from Colorado to North Texas. Now, just going into season number 8, I noticed that the top 12 teams, all of them are from either the ACC or the Big Ten at the moment, besides one of them, and that is Georgia. The rest of them are all from those 2 conferences. But even with all that in mind, the SEC is still ranked as the top 1, and I probably missed it before, but the Mountain West, a Division 1 conference, is ranked 7. The bottom division conferences or the second division conferences that are below it, like the American or Conference USA, are actually ranked higher. But a lot can change in one season, just not the fact that the top 6 teams are still all from the Big Ten or the ACC. Now, when looking across the entire country going into this final week, I found the most interesting thing to be West Virginia and Western Kentucky playing each other again, because this time, no matter who wins this game, they're going on to the Big 12. And I don't know what's going on in West Virginia, but there are 71 overall. It's nice to see teams like this fighting for promotion though. And this is why team overall is just completely irrelevant in this game. It's close down to the wire. But before we continue down the path of promotion and relegation, a word from today's video sponsor, Prize Picks. With football in full force, there's never been a better time to get the app, especially with my sign-up bonus. And the fact that Prize Picks is now available in over 40 states. I can get you $50 on there, but if you don't know what it is, you basically just pick between 2 to 6 players and then higher or lower on their projections. I personally like the smaller entries, but you could go for some bigger payouts too. And code BOARD or the QR code on the screen will get you $50 instantly whenever you play with your first $5 plus lineup. Now it's time to get back to all this promotion and relegation though. This could be a big moment for the Hilltoppers if they're able to get up to the Big 12, but they can't play defense. And there has been one big thing I've noticed with promotion and relegation so far. It seems like the same 4 to 5 teams from each conference seem to go up and down, but then for the bigger schools, they're rarely relegated. I mean, it kind of makes sense. I'm pretty sure that's how it works over in the soccer leagues. West Virginia can win this game with a field goal now. And this game is pretty important for the Big 12's reputation. Right now, they have so many Conference USA teams. I highly doubt they want to put another into the mix, but West Virginia's in a tough spot. 3rd and 10. They have no timeouts left, so they have to complete this to the sideline, though they're going to make a catch out of bounds. And that's exactly what they needed. Will their kicker make sure that they get promoted, though? We have seen them miss from this angle before, and he is going to miss. It's going to be pretty funny if West Virginia ends up staying relegated because of that, which is kind of likely since they have the ball first, and on 3rd and 4, they don't get it. Now, if he misses this kick as well, he's going to show up to his dorm room, and his key's not going to work. But he was able to drill it, so Western Kentucky has to score a touchdown to get the win here, which is looking likely. 12 yards is all the Hilltoppers need to get promotion, and they have it right here. So Western Kentucky is moving right back on up to the Big 12. It is so weird to see the relationship that's gone on between Conference USA and the Big 12, with FIU going up alongside Western Kentucky and Kansas State. And then up at the top of the conference, you still have original teams winning it, but going down is Kennesaw State, Colorado, and Kansas. Then in the Mountain West Conference, I guess Wyoming and San Diego State are getting sent down to the Pac-12, where it's just competitive. It doesn't matter that Fresno State and Hawaii are going back up, because either way, even with the higher division, they've not had success for a while. In the SEC though, Mississippi State's dropping back down to the Sun Belt alongside South Alabama and Oklahoma. This is what I'm saying though, it's the same teams going up and down because Louisiana Monroe, James Madison, and then Texas A&M are returning to the SEC. The two main conferences in this sim so far though, the ACC and the Big Ten's coming up. Out of the ACC, we have SMU, North Carolina, and Navy getting relegated. While in the American, Virginia and Virginia Tech are getting sent back up alongside East Carolina, who was also just in the ACC. Then out of the Big Ten, where once again, you're going to see a ton of top 25 teams, we have Indiana getting sent down, Minnesota getting sent down, and Ohio as well. Toledo's still staying afloat. They've remained a 3-star school with prestige, even though at one point they had playoff runs. And then coming up from the MAC, I'm not surprised to see Miami, Ohio again. We have Akron and Washington also going to the Big Ten. I think I'm starting to pick up on some trends that we'd see if this was ever a part of college football, but we need to see how the rest of the 15 years plays out. And if I was tracking Heisman winners, I'm pretty sure Ohio State's had like half of them at quarterback. I'm not saying he didn't deserve it, but there were a lot of other great quarterbacks. North Texas's didn't either, but the transfer did play well. This kid for NC State threw 0 interceptions. And then at the top of the stat sheet, we have Washington State's quarterback thrown for almost 50 touchdowns, but his interceptions held him back. Those Mountain West teams in the top division, though, are starting to show out stat-wise. Oregon State's running back led the race here, and then at receiver, of course, it's Washington State's. In the conference championships for playoff spots, I've noticed Ohio State's probably going for their 3rd title. But with how the bracket turned out, I can't say that they're set up nicely, and there's no group of 5 teams in this playoff either. By the time the championship game would roll around, Notre Dame was able to take out Ohio State. And not only do they have junior quarterback George Hackett on this roster right now, but they have a 99 overall running back. I don't think you can count Syracuse out though. They've become pretty good. Or maybe you can. Notre Dame ended up winning this one 28-3. Now I will say there was a point in this game where Syracuse had a 3-point lead, but something happened at halftime where Notre Dame was just able to figure out how to score. What we've been able to learn from this list of champions and even runners-up so far is all of them have basically come from the Big Ten or the ACC. And now we have Notre Dame, Oregon, Ohio State, and USC all tied for 2 championships in this video. 3 of those programs are still top 5 teams. USC went 7-6. And I'm trying to figure out what the exact correlation for these champions is so far. Right now, Ohio State and Oregon have been signing the top classes, but Notre Dame and USC have not. I also always love to see if there's any big transfers going on in the college football world, but nothing really stood out to me this season. I think the bottom division of Conference USA is so broken at the moment as well. You have Jacksonville State, Sam Houston, and Kennesaw State as the only original 3 teams still in it. Now, I accidentally finally did sim past week 14, so we're not seeing any promotion relegation games this year. But I feel like they haven't been that great recently anyway, and coming up from Conference USA back to the Big 12's Oklahoma State, Kansas, and Sam Houston. Once again, the teams at this top division thriving are still original Big 12 teams, and getting sent back down though is BYU, Kansas State, and Middle Tennessee State. The conference remains confusing for me. North Texas is not up here in the ACC this year though. They've fallen to 6-6. Boston College, Stanford, and UAB getting sent down. While in the American, we have 3 original ACC teams all returning to their conference, with Pitt, Cal, and Louisville moving up. I am happy to say that Kentucky had a half-decent season in the SEC. Nothing too crazy though. Here in this conference, Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Louisiana Monroe are going down. It's just the same teams moving laterally back and forth. All 3 of these, Louisiana, Georgia Southern, and Oklahoma, have been a part of the SEC in this video. And Boise State's still not going to be able to crack their way back into the playoffs yet, but it doesn't surprise me Colorado State and Utah State are going back down to the Pac-12, while UNLV and UTEP are going back up to the Mountain West. It's literally the same movements back and forth, though I do see some former MAC schools in the top 25 in the Big Ten. I mean, this is such a competitive conference. I feel like all their rankings are inflating them, though. Toledo has somehow avoided relegation at 1-8. Illinois, Purdue, UMass getting sent down. And now I wish I got to see that battle. We have Maryland, Bowling Green, and Indiana going to the Big Ten. I already know somebody's going to do it, so I'm excited to read the comment that statistically breaks down some of the stuff we've seen in this video. And look at this, is the SEC making a little bit of a return? Alabama's #1 in the country, but what I more importantly want to point out is Oklahoma's down in the Sun Belt in that 2nd division, but they're undefeated and ranked 12th. The games made it very challenging for 2nd division teams to get into the playoffs. And it is junior Chuck Church that is leading the country again. 47 passing touchdowns this year, not as many interceptions. I think he has another season of eligibility as well, so we'll see if he can do that again next season, but it seems like the top receivers in the country aren't on Washington State. Moving on to the national championship game, Florida State put out Miami University. They were the only group of 5 school in this bracket. Notre Dame is back in the title game. And I gotta check if they still have that same quarterback this entire time. No, it's Dennis Irvin this year. You have to give them their props though. Without the highest rated classes, they've put together some really good teams. And it took all this promotion relegation stuff to get Nebraska back in the national championship. With a little over a minute remaining, they also have a lead in this game, which is a big deal. Notre Dame needs to win this championship, because at the moment in this entire dynasty sim we've done, they're tied with 2 with every other team. But Nebraska might be about to enter the race to have the most by the end of this video. With the last 6 or 7 seasons we have, this could be the start of their legacy returning. And if that was George Hackett back there at quarterback, you know Notre Dame would already be down the field. They are about to take it inside the 40, but using their final timeout, only having 28 seconds to score, it's not looking great for them. I will say it's a lot nicer watching the sim in dynasty though. The clock doesn't run uncontrollably. Versus on play now, where spiking that ball would have taken like 15-20 seconds. So this is a little different than all the imperialisms. Here on 3rd and 10 though, they had to go to the sideline. And it's looking like we're not going to get an overtime game in this national championship. Will the Irish be able to spike the ball in this time frame though? No, they're trying to call a play. You've got to make sure everybody's set. They're going to hike it. This is it right here. Will they be able to get in? And he just fell over without even trying. Nebraska wins a national championship. It's another Big Ten school, so besides Notre Dame, only Big Ten schools have won it all. And I gotta point out, just seeing how all the title games have turned out, how the top recruiting classes still look. Anybody trying to say that college football 25 sim isn't more realistic than what we had in NCAA Football 14 is straight up lying to themselves. The top programs have stayed on top, the top conferences have stayed on top, but I should point out the Big Ten has finally passed up the SEC. And it's absolutely hilarious how close Conference USA is in passing up the Big 12 with their conference grade. That shouldn't even be remotely possible. The Big 12 gets to get rid of their worst 3 teams while taking on the best 3 from Conference USA every season. And there's still 6 more seasons where the top division and the bottom division could technically flip each other. Going into the final week of the season, this is one of the better years Conference USA has had as well. But what I really want to talk about is here in the SEC. Now up at the top, you have a bunch of teams beating up on each other, all like 7-4. It is what it is. But Oklahoma and James Madison are about to play each other, and the Dukes have been able to build themselves a pretty good roster. The loser of this game is most likely going to get relegated, and here in the snow at home, James Madison's defense has held Oklahoma to just 10 points. The Dukes made sure that they took care of business. It wasn't even a contest. They wanted to stay in the SEC for that extra revenue, and we've seen Oklahoma drop down so many times now. With a Missouri win, it's official. The Sooners are headed back to the Sun Belt alongside Arkansas and Marshall. They finally ended up falling back down, while Texas State and Appalachian State are going up alongside Ole Miss, who is undefeated, but there's no way they're going to make the playoffs. Then in the Mountain West, all Boise State had to do was win one more game, but they couldn't do that. Fresno State drops down with Washington State. And coming back up, San Jose State, Nevada, it's just the same switches. There's not any real risers coming out of the bottom division over there, but here in Conference USA, Middle Tennessee State's going up again, Arizona State is, and Jacksonville State is too. They've been competitive in the past. Sam Houston actually finished near the top of the Big 12, elevating this conference, while Western Kentucky, Arizona, and UConn are going down. It just hit me as well that I think UConn's been in the Big 12 since they got promoted there in season number 1. They've only had 3 winning seasons since getting moved up, but they have 2 conference championships. It was only a matter of time before they went down though, and here in the ACC, Tulsa, Georgia Tech, and UTSA are going to the American. Besides Miami going down that one year, the movement between these conferences hasn't been that crazy. Temple is ranked though, Wake Forest and Rice also getting promoted. And then the Big Ten, the one that has led the way throughout this entire rebuild, USC could still get into the playoffs with 4 losses. Anyway, Maryland, Michigan State, and Northern Illinois are going down. While from the MAC, we have 3 ranked schools, Illinois, Central Michigan, and Iowa. All of them have been promoted to the Big Ten. This actually seems like one of the more balanced years we've had across the conferences. And Miami's quarterback was able to win the Heisman with 41 passing touchdowns. Now, I'm more intrigued on how Washington State got relegated from the Mountain West, with their quarterback being one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the country. And just looking at the running backs, Western Kentucky had a guy up here. When it comes to receiving yards, Wake Forest and Kansas led the way. But of course, what's most important for playoff seeding is your conference champion winners, and I can't believe that Sam Houston's been able to climb as far up as they have. They just got promoted last season, now they have a first round bye in the playoffs. But unfortunately for them, Georgia beat them by 14, and Georgia's in the championship against Ohio State. It was only a matter of time before an SEC team got back to this point. And back in like season number 2 or 3, Ohio State beat Georgia in the national championship, so they're trying to get revenge. It's a tie game with a minute left, but I think the Bulldogs can win this, because all they have to do is get into field goal range, and it's not like they're that far away. I'd say they need about 5 or 10 more yards with 50 seconds left, a couple timeouts, I guess 1 timeout. They should be fine. But no, instead that dude just got dogpiled on by like 4 other dudes, and they're at the 50. This is the Bulldogs' chance to clutch up. Otherwise, we're probably looking at overtime. And Ohio State might have given up the pass, but are they also going to give up a field goal? Well, I don't want to say there isn't a chance for the Buckeyes to still come out on top, but it's not looking great. They want to take a lead, get in 3 national championships before anybody else, but they only have 15 seconds now to get into field goal range, and this pass is going to get them more than into field goal range. Georgia, what are you doing pressing somebody? The Buckeyes have done it. They're going to win their 3rd championship. This is honestly unbelievable. They just blew it. And Georgia's going to be known in this dynasty for just choking to the Buckeyes. That is now 2 championships they've lost to them. There's simply no way that this play works. So as we go into our final 5 seasons, Ohio State has the most championships with 3. They might be going for number 4 as well. They're currently the number 5 team in the country. This is going into the final week of the season, though at the bottom of the Big Ten, you're going to see a lot of former MAC schools and then Iowa and Indiana. But I don't want to cover that. You might notice at the top of the ACC in this week 14, Miami is missing. They're all the way down here. They could get relegated again. And it's not looking great for them. They have to play on the road at Syracuse, while Virginia Tech gets to play Rice, and that's the only team that's in their way of going down. What's so weird is I feel like the Hurricanes were just in the playoffs as well. And they were. They've won back-to-back ACC championships, but they're going back to their 2029 season where they got relegated to the American. That means this has to be the game that we spectate in the final week of season number 11. And it is all tied up at 21 with a minute left in the game. Now, because of where Miami's at, Syracuse is not in a great spot. They're going to have to force a turnover or something. That could have happened there. But he wasn't able to locate the ball in the air, so now Miami has it on a 2nd and 10 in there at midfield. This could be a huge stop for the Orange, though, and they sent in so much pressure. That's not going to be enough to get a stop, though. Now they're rolling out, slinging it deep, and what a catch! You know what? For bringing that ball in, Miami deserves to avoid being relegated, and they're honestly better off if they don't take this in. I don't think we're going to see Syracuse go ahead and score a touchdown with this much time left, but I thought the same thing about the national championship that we just watched, and they're going to start this with a great completion. They were able to get out of bounds, they got a nice gain, and now they're slinging it where it's not caught. That receiver thought he could do what the Miami receiver did for a second. Instead, he was more like a Florida State receiver. And on 3rd and 3, 17 seconds left, no timeouts. You cannot take a sack. They almost did. All right, it all comes down to this right here. Is Syracuse going to come back? They're the top 25 team. They're ranked higher. Their quarterback doesn't have anywhere to go. And that means Miami should avoid being relegated from the ACC. I've also noticed Notre Dame is number 1 in the country right now, so they're still doing well, but Miami avoided it. Virginia Tech avoided it. bit, and them beating Rice actually sent them down. I'm sure they're not going to be excited to go back to the American. Stanford, Tulane, and Boston College are moving up to the ACC. And look at Boise State in the Mountain West Conference. The top division there, they have gone 10-2, while New Mexico and UTEP get sent right back down to the Pac-12. I think this is one of the better teams we've seen come out of the conference, with Fresno State being 9-3, top 25. Washington State also gets promoted to the Mountain West. And here in the SEC, where's Kentucky? Okay, Kentucky is not dropping down, but Appalachian State, Louisiana, and James Madison are. There's still programs like Vanderbilt, Mississippi State that aren't moving back up to the SEC though. We have Arkansas, Southern Miss, and Oklahoma going up. And look at what's going on in Houston at the moment with these two Houston teams. I will say, compared to all the other conferences, the SEC seems to be the most balanced with teams that were originally in it. Because right now in the Big 12, you got UCF, Oklahoma State, and Arizona State all dropping down to Conference USA. While Iowa State, UConn, and Kennesaw State are going up. How many Big 12 original teams are going to be in this conference? I know it's not one of the big two. It's not the strongest, but how they've performed has been surprising. UCLA's top 6? I never thought I'd see that, but the teams going down aren't Toledo. It is Ball State, Iowa, and Miami, Ohio. Finally, coming up from the MAC conference, it's not Rutgers, it's not Maryland, it's not Northwestern, it's not Michigan State, it's not Minnesota, it's not Purdue. No. It's NIU, Ohio, and Buffalo. Just looking at all the movement up and down, there's really not too many surprises in season 11, and the Heisman winner from this year is going to come from Clemson. What's weird though is when you look at his passing yard totals, I'm not sure he was even a top 15 or top 20 quarterback in the country, but it was the passing touchdowns that put him over the limit, and then when it came to receivers, Boise State had the best one. They have also made the playoffs with an automatic bid. Southern Miss got in as well. I'm pretty sure that's from the Sun Belt, but that bracket has to have the most group of 5 teams we have ever seen in this so far, and I think it's because of all these conference championships. In the quarterfinals, this was one of the most surprising results of the playoffs, because Notre Dame went down while Sam Houston got thrashed by Clemson, and Tulane, Charlotte, and Southern Miss didn't make it out of the first round. This Boise State team is an 85 overall though, compared to Clemson's 91, so I'd imagine it's going to be pretty difficult for them to win this. Just looking at the stats, Boise State does average more points per game, but of course that was against weaker opponents, even though they are in a top division, and they're not going to come back with 20 seconds left. It's a shame that they were only able to score 3 points. But what this means for Clemson is they have a pretty good chance at winning it all. We've seen multiple SEC schools get this far but not be able to do anything with it. But I felt like I was tripping out seeing Ole Miss in this game. They just got promoted up from the Sun Belt at least a season or 2 ago. That's not stopped them from putting up a pretty solid fight though. And with 2 minutes left, they're trailing by 6. They're on a 3rd and 7, but they take a sack. That was the worst thing that could have happened right there, because now they feel like they have to go for it on 4th and 16, and they weren't going to get it, but he breaks the tackle and he gets into the end zone. That is a grown man's play right there. He threw that dude off of him, and who would have thought Ole Miss would have a lead? With how much they've gone up and down through promotion and relegation in this video, I almost feel like I'm rooting for an underdog right now if I'm rooting for them. You have to remember though, they're facing off against the Heisman winner, the #1 team in the country. So it was almost a guarantee he was going to lead them down the field to get a field goal. If they start running the ball, the Rebels have 3 chances to get a stop. They still have all of their timeouts left, and I'd assume that's what's going to happen on the next 3 plays, but no, Clemson is still throwing it. That ball slipped out, so now they're going to go to running the football, and I think Ole Miss is going to be just fine. They're going to have a perfect chance to respond. The Tigers do have to hit this field goal in the first place though for that to even matter, and we've seen Big Ten champions, we've seen ACC champions, but the SEC still has 0 representation throughout this entire video. That's probably been the biggest surprise. I think everybody's literally just been finishing 8-4 over and over, but Ole Miss is streaking down the sidelines. I'm not sure what 28 was doing, and we keep on having chaotic finishes in these championships. With a decent kick return though, Clemson is starting this drive on the 29. They've already gotten it to midfield, and who's to say the Tigers aren't going to score another touchdown as well? They're moving the ball really well. The only problem is now they have 0 timeouts left, so sometimes you got to throw it away. This is it for this Heisman winning quarterback though. He has achieved everything he's wanted to in college besides getting himself a national championship. You have got to make a play right here, and this is a true moment for his legacy, for his family, for his friends, where he misses his target. The misconnection there, the bad throw, leads him to a 4th and 10. He's kind of panicking before chucking this one to the end zone. Will it be caught? It will, but it's by an Ole Miss defender. There it is. It might not be Kentucky, but the SEC does have some representation with a championship winner, and it took us until year number 11, but we're starting to get some more variety. I'm actually very sad there's only 4 seasons left to this. I've been enjoying following the college football world. Houston signed a top 7 class. Syracuse had the #2 class. class. And to my surprise, the ACC somehow passed up the SEC in conference rankings. I will say, I almost feel like something's gone completely wrong with the Big 12 and Conference USA. 9 of the 10 teams in this conference were originally a part of the Big 12. And I think this is a big reason why we haven't seen any teams out of this top division really make a great deep run at it, because it's just been filled up with a bunch of Conference USA teams. I mean, even the other conferences like the Big 10 that just sent 3 MAC schools back to the MAC out of it still are infiltrated with a lot of other MAC schools. But I would have never predicted the Big 12 playing out as terribly as it has, maybe Liberty moving up and having some success. This could be the year the Big 12 flushes out some of those teams though, including Liberty. There's a chance they get sent down going into this final week. Whereas in Conference USA, of course they're going to send up a few teams that used to be a part of the Big 12 because Western Kentucky's the only team that wasn't. I also can't believe I'm saying this, but the Mountain West might get 2 teams into the playoffs. There's a lot I could keep up with or spectate just on teams that might go down. Kentucky's already guaranteed to. They play Louisville, their rivals, not a conference opponent. But it's really hard to check in on one specific game because LSU could lose while Southern Miss could also lose, and so could Missouri, and then we don't know who's going down. Due to there not being any guaranteed promotion or relegation games, I just decided to sim the week. LSU came out on top. Kentucky isn't dropping down because Missouri and Southern Miss lost, so Texas State will join those 2 teams in the Sun Belt next year, while Troy, James Madison, and Mississippi State go up to the SEC. Also, it looks like Fresno State and Boise State won their games as well, while Hawaii and Oregon State are going down to the Pac-12 coming up from that conference. We got Utah State and Wyoming. It's been the same couple teams in rotation. I've said it a couple times, but it really feels like the same ones. The Big 12 finally had the shift that they needed though. They've sent down Liberty, Sam Houston, who was just in the playoffs, and Jacksonville State, while replacing them with Texas Tech, West Virginia, and Colorado, who are all ranked inside the top 25. Conference USA might be rated above the Big 12 right now. You got the Big 3 and the Big 10 that are all ranked at the moment, but this conference has kind of fallen off. It's the same thing that happened to the SEC though. They ended up beating up on each other. Central Michigan, Akron, NIU going to the MAC, while 3 original Big 10 schools, Iowa, Northwestern, and Maryland, are replacing them with promotion. It seems like the conferences are starting to restore themselves with what they should have been 10 years ago. Virginia Tech, Tulane, and Temple to the American. And finally, we got Virginia going up to the ACC alongside UTSA and Memphis. With this promotion and relegation, both the Big 10 and the Big 12 were able to get 3 of their original members back. And the Heisman winner was actually from a group of 5 team. Fresno State's receiver came out on top. That was a nice little surprise for the smaller schools. He had 19 receiving touchdowns, though some of these other receivers up near the top of this, like from Liberty's team, were also really good. So you gotta wonder how they got relegated. Boise State's quarterback is who led the country in passing yards, and then rushing wise, we got Georgia, BYU, and New Mexico State. With Fresno State winning the conference championship, I'm wondering if Boise State was also able to get into the playoffs. I'm not sure who wins the conference championship matters too much, because the Broncos literally moved up in the polls by losing, and they're playing Baylor. They took a long break from getting to the playoffs, but they seem to have come back. There's also Fresno State we can watch in this, but I am disappointed to say neither team even made the semifinals. And wasn't Miami just about to be relegated? Talk about bouncing back for this team right here. They're playing Georgia in the championship, and they've been able to get the ball back down by 3 points with about 40 seconds left, but they have no timeouts, so completing that pass in bounds was one of the worst things they could have done. Now it's 3rd and 6 for them, 27 seconds left on the clock, and you don't want to take a sack. Now it's 4th and 13. It feels like Miami is not going to beat Georgia. There's a flag on the play. I don't care the Bulldogs are getting the interception. It matters who the penalty was against, and I think it's going to be the Hurricanes. All those years of Georgia failing to win the national championship, they came up short twice, but this 3rd time they were able to make it happen. But it's important to note, with only 3 seasons left of this, Ohio State is in a lead with 3 championships compared to teams with only 1 or 2. I feel like they're in a good spot to do that. I mean, they keep signing top classes. Syracuse's top classes have to pay off at some point, and we're about to see if anything crazy happens in season number 13. Well, a 9-3 UTSA team being at the top of the ACC was not what I expected. We'll see if anybody interesting's going down. And I can't believe how many teams I'm seeing ranked inside the Big 12 at the moment. It's like they're having a comeback. They're probably projected to send these teams down, but there is one more week. So in seeing if we can find anything shocking that might throw me off, I've seen Kentucky is 1-10. It doesn't get much worse than that, so we'll go to the next week. And this is where Kentucky's relegation's going to be official, but I want to point out the SEC has 4 of the top 5 teams in the country. They've made a comeback in the last couple years, getting rid of Troy, Georgia Southern, and my Wildcats, while bringing up Missouri, Marshall, and South Carolina. Over in the Mountain West Conference, Boise State seems to be the only team that can have success, though Nevada's ranked and Wyoming and UNLV are going down. Hawaii's coming up though, so is Oregon State, who's inside the top 25, and the Big Big 12, revisiting this because I'm curious how many of these teams actually make the playoffs. They're officially sending down West Virginia, Kennesaw State, and Kansas, while adding in Jacksonville State, Oklahoma State, and Kansas State from Conference USA. Then we have the Big 10 over here that used to be so dominant. They still have a few teams inside the top 10, but Northwestern, Indiana, and Ohio are gone. While the MAC is sending 3 original MAC schools to the Big 10 with Ball State, Kent State, and Central Michigan. 2 of them are in the top 25. It's definitely been an interesting year in college football. If UTSA is still ranked number 2, I don't know how they've done that at 9-3. But North Texas's time in the ACC is done, along with Pittsburgh and Charlotte. I feel like it's been a little bit, though, since we've seen a team go down that I was just not expecting. USF, Tulsa, and Tulane going up to the ACC. And it really stinks to say this, but this is one of the final times we're going to get to see this chart. For our Heisman winner, it was Texas's quarterback, Oscar Areza. And it looks like even though they're the number 1 team, the Longhorns have drawn Colorado in the first round of the playoffs. Now, how they're ranked number 1 after not even playing in the SEC championship, it beats me. But that's where they're at. They had the best quarterback in the country, unless you want to argue it was Tulsa's, who also had some really good stats, less turnovers. New Mexico State's running back was the best one here. But I'm also not going to discredit Zeke Strange for Stanford, and then receiving-wise, we got 16 touchdowns out of Wilcox. You know who didn't make it to the semifinals in this, though? Either the small schools in the playoffs that both had a first-round bye. So we've been left with these 2 teams in our national championship game. They keep on being classics for us, though. Right now, LSU's trailing by 5. And are we about to see our 3rd straight SEC champion? They're going to need a touchdown. Michigan's defense could win it for them right here, but they didn't get in fast enough. And on this screen, it says they're the number 1 team in the country. I wonder if that's seeding. I don't know. It also said Texas was number 1 on the bracket earlier on. But either way, what's important is LSU has 45 seconds now to get 5 points. On 3rd and 6, that felt like a laser. But that receiver just got strapped up by a white corner, and on 4th and 6, they're floating it over in that direction where they make the catch. They couldn't beat that dude with routes, so they beat him with speed, and now they throw it straight to him. He makes up for his mistake. So the white corner has bounced back for Michigan. Cooper DeJean 2.0 makes sure that Michigan is able to win it all. And the SEC as a whole was not able to go for the three-peat. Instead, it goes to the Big 10. With only 2 seasons left, though, it's starting to feel like these smaller programs like Boise State, 33rd best recruiting class, just aren't going to have what it takes to win it all. Well, I know the top of the ACC is definitely going to throw y'all for a loop, Syracuse at 7-4, but guess who is not up there? It is Notre Dame. They're probably not going to have a chance at getting another championship if they get relegated this season. So they have to win their final game against Stanford, and if they don't, it's over. Before we see the final promotion and relegation stuff, this felt like a good one to hop into. Because keep in mind, Notre Dame is still in the running to have the most championships in this video. I think it would be hilarious if Stanford ended that right here, though they chewed the clock with a minute left, so now they only have 20 seconds to score a touchdown. And wonderful, we have flipped the camera for no reason at all. Will they be able to do anything with this? Their quarterback's trying to make a play. So they were just fortunate they didn't take a sack right there. You gotta throw it deep or something. This is Notre Dame's saving grace right here. They'll still have a chance to go for a championship in the next year, assuming this doesn't work. But Stanford caught that ball. You can also see the tree over there, their mascot, in the top left corner. He's stomping on the ground. Can they get a touchdown on this play? They've set themselves up to do it, and they don't. Oh well, I guess the Irish are not dropping down to the American. And in our final season of this sim, the teams that are going to get relegated down there are East Carolina, NC State, and Memphis. These 3 teams getting promoted should have a better chance at making the playoffs, though. We have Rice, we have Pittsburgh, and we have Temple. And then over in the Big 12, I wasn't expecting there to be a number 1 team, but that's what Baylor is right now. We have FIU, Jacksonville State, Texas Tech going to Conference USA. While coming up, we don't have West Virginia. No, we have Liberty, Sam Houston, and UCF. The Big 10 also hasn't had as much success, so an undefeated Nebraska team's ranked 3rd in the country. We have Toledo, Maryland, and Illinois dropping down. Toledo finally went back to the MAC. And Miami University can't stop going between the Big 10 in this conference. Akron and Michigan State are also getting promoted. While in the Mountain West Conference, Washington State has done better than Boise State. It's finally somebody different, and Nevada and Oregon State go down. Coming up from the Pac-12, we have Wyoming, Colorado State, and then the SEC. 3 top 10 teams. Tennessee's getting close there as well, so there's a little bit more success coming out of it. James Madison, Marshall, South Carolina are done though. And finally, we have Louisiana, Texas State, and Troy getting promoted to the SEC for the final season. This has been a constant journey for a lot of these teams, going back and forth between the 2 conferences. But we still have 2 more championship winners to select. This was one of the final Heisman winners from UCF, and with 56 passing touchdowns, he definitely deserved this award. Over at running back, we have New Mexico State's running back up there again. and then Nebraska had a wide receiver, Colorado had a receiver, Penn State even did. I have noticed having stat leaders doesn't always mean that much though, because going into the final week, Penn State was 2-6 in conference play. So they were clearly not a member of all of these conference championships, and we'll see who ended up making the playoffs. Well, we got Washington State to root for and a number 1 seeded Tulsa that came out of the ACC, but that's about it. So I was really hopeful at least one of them would have made the semifinals, but it didn't happen. That means to get to the championship, Nebraska had to destroy Georgia. And then between Houston and Baylor, the Cougars have made it all the way. The Cornhuskers have been given a chance to win another championship, or it could go to Houston. And I know there's no way they made it this far as just an 81 overall. Their roster is way better than that. They have a senior quarterback that's a 93 overall. This is the representation the Big 12 has been begging for. And once I actually joined their team, it seems like their overall actually updated. I really don't like that I have to create a new coach every single game I want to hop into and spectate though. EA, you gotta make it to where on the next game we're able to watch any game across the country. It was a feature we had on NCAA Football 14. No reason we shouldn't have it now. Houston gets in though, and that's big for them because before this touchdown they were down by 14. Now I have just realized an undefeated 15-0 Nebraska team was seated below a 1-loss Tulsa team. So that's an interesting ranking, but they're literally running out of bounds for losses. They fumbled it down here, and is Nebraska choking? It certainly would not be out of character for this school to blow a game in this fashion. But the national championship, you just can't do that. I actually really like watching the computer play each other on this game too. I don't know, I just find it entertaining. It's what makes Imperialism fun. And this right here is why. They've squandered a 14-point lead in just a 30-second time frame. They're missing a tackle. But Houston's about to get this football back, and they're going to have a chance to represent their conference. Let's see, are they going to have trouble with the snap maybe? No, they're going to get the punt off at least, but it was not going to be far ever. I mean, they're getting it past midfield. So all the Cougars have to do is get like 1 first down, and they have won this game. They're going to take the championship. This is unbelievable, but the Big 12 has waited so long. And if this was just a couple of seasons ago, we could say we had a group of 5 team win it all. 3rd and 5 right here. Nebraska's going to look to call a timeout, but they didn't put out any run D. So the Cougars are just going to run out the rest of the clock and settle for 3 versus the Cornhuskers. The ball has been picked up by Nebraska though. Hang on. How is Houston blowing this game right here? They're going to let them return it all the way. I can't believe what I'm witnessing right now. There's no challenge flag or anything. They're kicking the extra point. And there's no shot. We've witnessed 2 fumbles in this. This is a generational choke from Houston. The Big 12 is just not meant to win a championship in this video. And then Nebraska's getting injury timeouts, which just helps out the Cougars, though they throw a pick. So that is going to be it. Nebraska has won themselves another national championship. By the way, it's kind of crazy that this was never even reviewed. His knee was down. And this is a picture of it right here. There was also a ref right in front of it. I don't want to discredit Nebraska since they went undefeated, but if they had that call correct, they would have lost that game. And I guess we'll see if this Big 12 conference can get any revenge in the final season of this sim. Now, I do think it's important we take one final look at all these conferences. Here we have the ACC, the top division. It's been feeding into the American. And then we have the Big 10. There's actually a lot of MAC schools in the Big 10 in this final season. I have counted 7 of them. But the Big 12's been a big conversation in this video. At one point, they sent down most of their teams to Conference USA. And they still have 6 in there, which is more than the majority, but it's not as bad as it was at one point. Moving on to the MAC, the bottom division for the Big 10 ended up having 7 original Big 10 teams in it, with only 6 of their original being here. And then in trying to get the conference champion at automatic bid, we made the Mountain West the top division. Boise State is probably the only team here that never left it. While down in the Pac-12, I'm pretty sure every team, even Air Force, ended up getting promoted at some point. Then there's the SEC. For all the top division conferences, I'd say this is the least infiltrated one. Right now, they only have 3 schools from the Sun Belt. And it's not like it's lost that much balance, because the teams they sent down are Kentucky, I hate to admit, South Carolina, and then Vanderbilt. Anyway, with all that covered, these are the final rankings. SEC ended up being on top. The Big 12 jumped the Big 10 somehow, and Conference USA got up to number 5. We'll see how this final season plays out, but the link between the Pac-12 and the Mountain West was by far the weakest one in this entire video. Alright, so going into the conference championship week, here in the ACC, Florida State is on top at 12-0. Who would have gotten relegated? It would have been USF, Pitt, and UTSA. While Virginia Tech, Army, Memphis would have come up, I don't think either of these teams are going to get into the playoffs. And just looking at Conference USA, that's probably going to be true for most of these bottom division teams. Up in the Big 12, though, their last chance at a championship is either UCF, UConn, or maybe Colorado winning. Houston is going to fall a little bit short. And even if I'm not putting it all out on a chart who would have have gotten relegated, you can still see. The Big Ten is interesting. Wisconsin's up here. UCLA as well. I'm not sure if we have seen that yet in this video. Down at the bottom, Michigan State. And they fit right in with this MAC conference, though we will see a chance of Northern Illinois making it all the way to the playoffs. Then you have the Mountain West Conference and the Pac-12. Nobody's getting in out of the Mountain West Conference if Boise State doesn't do well, and then out of the Pac-12, of course, there's nothing here. So that leaves us with the SEC, which is actually very close to not putting a team into the playoffs. I'm not sure what's going on right now. And down in the Sun Belt, Kentucky is down here at 4-8. Yep, I've seen enough. For our Heisman winner, it looks like Tyler Gold's going to run it back. I think this is the first time we've had a repeat Heisman winner, but he deserved it. He was better than all the other quarterbacks in the country, besides maybe Wisconsin's, who put up some good numbers. And you're not going to see a Wisconsin running back up here. They are throwing the ball now. They are no longer a run-heavy team. UCF did have the best receiver. And when it comes to these conference championship results, they did lose to UConn. Northern Illinois up to 15. They might sneak in. But I just realized they've been passed up by number 14 Virginia Tech, who's actually coming out of the American Conference. By the time the semifinals have rolled around, though, we have seen a little bit of chaos. UConn has made it this far. UCF's also made a little bit of a run. And we have to see if one of these two teams can still redeem the Big 12. There's a decent chance that both of them lose in the semifinals. But I think UConn fans would be happy with the fact that they've made it this far before, they got relegated, and now they're back. Just reaching the playoffs by itself is an accomplishment, especially a couple of times, but they're throwing an interception. They're down by 10 with 30 seconds left. So I think we all know that UConn is not going to take down the Seminoles. There's still a chance for the back-to-back Heisman winner to make a run to the championship, though. But the Ducks are currently trying to tie Ohio State for the most championships in this video. UCF, this is a great chance for y'all to actually win a real championship, so you don't have to pretend with that one from like 5 seasons ago. And they're actually going to make it that far. They didn't just beat the Ducks. At one point, this game was 38-13. If there's anybody that's going to do it for the Big 12, it is Tyler Gold. And with that result, Ohio State's 3 championships will be the most that any team's getting in this 15-year sim. Now, I think we have to take a closer look at Tyler Gold. He's a 91 overall, but he only has impact dev, and it's not like his accuracies are even maxed out. This is it right here, though. It all comes down to one final game. And I think after making this video and having so much fun with it, I'm gonna make a video where I sim like 20 years in the future. I want to see how the college football world plays out, because this has been entertaining. Even if this game was not, UCF handled business pretty well. They made their run all the way to the title, and you gotta feel for Florida State fans at some point. It's not getting any better for them. I was really hoping that we were going to end this one with like a really good game, but instead what we saw in this video was every conference that was a top division besides the Mountain West / Pac-12 ended up having a team that won a championship. And leave a comment or a like on this video if you enjoyed a different type of style one. I enjoyed filming it. I also will be looking for statistical breakdowns on anything. I am a nerd. I like that stuff. But yeah, check out some of my other content, and my final note for promotion and relegation is in college football, I think it just helped the best teams stay at the top.